I did about myself. But like, ask yourself, okay, I shouldn't do husband-wife, that could get violent. But ask yourself, when you were out with your friend last week, what color socks were they wearing? What exactly did they talk about? Right? What was it? And you'll see, it's just an easy way to see, do I really care about that person? Or just like having that person because somehow it makes me feel good, right? It's like having a doll, make me feel good, or we think alike. Therefore, I know I'm not insane because look, I found somebody else actually thinks like me. Woo! I'm not crazy, right? That's my friends. Do I have any of my friends who don't think like me? If I'm a right-wing kind of guy, do I have any friends who are left-wing? I hate that right-wing, left-wing. I always say, you ever see a bird fly without both wings? So anyhow, it's about understanding, it's about communicating, it's about listening, it's about knowing that truth is everywhere. Everybody's got truth. You have to understand how to extract the truth and see it in the world. And as Jews, we know that more important than being right is shalom, is being peaceful, especially when how we talk to each other and communicate with each other. So again, this way of acquisition of a friend, it's investing time, thought, sensitivity. It's really understanding about that. And then in the same way, there is no better friend in your life than you. The job is to become your own best friend. Many people, if you ever really want to know who you really are, the best way to know it is to just stand alone in a room for 10 minutes. Where do you go? Where does your mind go? What do you think about? What do you think about when you look in the mirror? Do you love yourself? Are you happy with what you see? Why not? God loves you because voila, here you are. You're alive. How much money did you pay for last month's pumping heart bill? How much money do you pay for last month's vascular system that moved your blood? Right? How much money do you pay for your eyesight? Is it by time? What? Hearing? What is this? What is this amazing thing? And there's no battery, there's no plug. I mean, what is this? This is pure love of God for each of us. That's what it really is. And therefore, we need to be able to see ourselves that there is something about us. Have we screwed up? Absolutely. Welcome to Earth. First time here. But the challenge is to overcome that and to grow and to become bigger and better. So therefore, if you acquire your name, it means you really know who you are. Part of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. So often we fall into the herd mentality. We just go along with whatever's cool, or whatever everyone's doing. We don't think for ourselves. We don't feel for ourselves. We don't say, time out. How do I feel about this? What do I think about that? Right? Does that really make sense to me? Even if the guy's telling me he's got a really long beard, or a cool-looking person, or a rock star, hold on. Does it really fit in my knowledge data bank of what I think life is all about? And so as you learn to do that, you really get to understand and recognize yourself. And the truth be told, once you become your own best friend and you acquire yourself, you've acquired life. And that's why if kona atzmacha, kona shem tov, kona atzmacha, by acquiring the good name. Now why the good name? Because God made us all good. Even if we muck it up with all of the bad that we've done, it doesn't negate the good. Because the good is from a higher world. It cannot be polluted. The only thing that can be done is hidden from us. But it doesn't mean it's not there. It's always there. And that's why a person can do tshuva even at their last breath of life. Why wait? But the point is, it can always be because it's always there. That's the key concept of understanding who we are. The other thing I want to just point about this is, okay, that's in terms of acquiring one's name. I just happen to bring some very interesting things about names per se. Well, I'll just share with you a few Gemaras because I kind of find that a little bit wild here. The Gemara talking about the power of name, many of you have heard this before. There's an idea that God forbid somebody gets sick, they change the name as if to say, well, the person who's sick upon whom that decree was decreed is no longer this person. It's like a new person with a new name. The Gemara in Gittin actually goes a little bit further. It says, when is it time to change your family name? Which I thought was kind of interesting because I thought family names was only like the last couple of hundred years. But the Gemara in Gittin, if you want to have a look, it's on Daf 88 Aleph, actually discusses this and asks for how many generations is a family name valid, which is also kind of funky. I didn't know how to get an expiration date, It's sort of like, I remember my kids once asked me, they said, Dad, what was your email address in college? So I couldn't even say CompuServe because I didn't have, that was still like yet to come, a long time later. The Gemara Megillah, I don't want to get into politics here at all, but the Gemara Megillah takes a really interesting thing. It says like this. It's actually Rashi brings it in Chumash, but who is a Jew? Right? It's kind of a hot subject in this country for the last 3,000 years. So who is a Jew? So the Gemara gives an answer. I don't know why we don't use this, because maybe it gets into political problems of converts and all the rest of that, but Gemara simply says, who is a Jew? A person who rejects Avodah Zorah, who does not believe in idols. That is a Jew. How do we know it? From Mordechai HaYehudi. The question was what tribe Mordechai came from. But according to the opinion that Mordechai came from the tribe of Benjamin, so then why is he calling Yehudi? Because Yehudi would infer he's from the tribe of Judah. So the answer is because, yes, he's from the tribe of Benjamin, but he was called a Yehudi because he rejected idols. So this is a very interesting idea, that this could actually be a technical definition as to what is called. If you want to find the Rashi, by the way, it's a couple weeks ago, when it's talking about Esav's various wives and children towards the end of the Parsha, it mentions the name of Yehudit. And Rashi says there that he tried to fool his father into saying, oh, look, she's from Beis Yaakov, really nice from girl, and gave her the name Yehudit. But why did it Yehudit? There were no Yehudim in those days. And the answer was, and Ramban talks about this also there were Yehudim. Who are the Jews? The ones that rejected idolatry. Very interesting concept, but that's just, I'm only approaching now from the level of the concept of name. We know Rebbe Meir, very famous Gemara in Yuma, where Rebbe Meir throughout Shas actually always discerns the nature of a person when he meets them by their name. And of course the famous Gemara in Yuma is he's traveling with two other rabbis. I'll just tell the short version. And then he knew from the name that that was really the essence of the person. So that's another idea of how the power, okay, so the story is that the rabbis are traveling and they come to this inn and all of a sudden they want to leave their valuables with the innkeeper. But when they hear the name of this guy, Rebbe Meir says, whoa, that name sounds like thief. Hi, welcome to my home. My name is Mr. Thief. So he decided instead of doing that, he was going to bury this goods by the head of the grave of the father of the owner of the thing. That night, the guy's father peers to the owner and says, whoa, 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 quick, get out here and dig up the area by my head because one of your hosts or guests just buried all of his. So Rebbe Meir couldn't find his stuff. And when they came for the other stuff, the guy said, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. In fact, this is the source of Mayim Achronim, this Gemara, I just remembered. It's just as a little side point. So when they were eating breakfast with him, they saw some of his breakfast in his, or maybe not eating, but they saw some of his breakfast in his beard. So they then came to the wife, without the husband knowing, and says, your husband said you could really give us all this stuff, and the proof is that he had scrambled eggs for breakfast. So she did, of course, he killed her. But okay, that's a Talmudic story. But the point being is that that is how he knew. Rebbe Meir was sensitive because of the nature of the name. The Gemara says in Brachas that the person's name brings about a person's destiny. The name that you have is your guiding light throughout your entire life, guiding you towards your destiny. Which I said, I don't know if this is appropriate, and I'll edit it later, but just because of the mind-blowing news in today's news about Bill Cosby being brought up on charges, so I thought you might find interesting the Gemara in Sanhedrin explains where the name Cosby comes from, right? Because we have Cosby in the Chumash, right? So it was also related to the charges, if you will. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that the name Cosby means to falsify, meaning that this case happened to be a woman. She lied about her father and told him, when he had told him, and also the word Cosby breaks down, Kaz means to devour, and by, like Cosby rather, means she made herself into a zonah, into a prostitute. So a devouring prostitute is a reference to the Torah where the name Cosby came from. I just kind of, since the name does indicate, I remember once I had to go into New York City because they killed a deer in the Central Park Zoo. If you remember that, little bears up on the, anyhow. So I went in there and I was working with a company and we were bringing in a security system, and I got awarded and I got to meet the head of the New York State National Zoo and Park, Mr. Wolf. So that, as a young man, I always watched out for sometimes names are really funny and coincidence. By the way, the Gemara in Megillah says that the name Arafat means falling apart, which I also kind of thought was sort of interesting. But the one I love the most, especially because I'm into Marvel Comics, is the Gemara Menachos says that the Gemara praises Reb Sheshes by calling him Iron Man. So if you want to know Iron Man Menalin, what was the real original Iron Man? It was Reb Sheshes. And if you know Reb Sheshes' stories, they are mind-boggling. I'll just throw you one of hundreds. But he's sitting alone in a little shul, I'm sure you remember this more, and all of a sudden there's like a loud noise, and he kind of like, peek, well, he doesn't peek because he's blind, but he listens, and it was the Shekhinah coming. And it seems that when the divine presence comes, it sends out like, worse than hell's angels, it sends out heaven's angels. And they clear the way. And so the Shekhinah was coming down to the shul, and there was like a little yid in there, so these front angels came to like yank him. And he said, wow, wow. And sure enough, if Sheshes was actually able to push off the Shekhinah so he like didn't have to move. That's like mega Iron Man. You talk about the guys that Iron Man fights in his movies. Let's see that Iron Man fight off the Shekhinah. That was the incredible power of Iron Man. Anyhow, the Gemara Brachos says a very interesting thing. I'm just going to read the translation I wrote here. It's Reb Yochanan. If we all die, what is the purpose of life? To which he said, fortunate is the person who learns God's word, creates a pleasant existence before his Creator, earns himself a good name, and leaves this world with a good name. That's Reb Yochanan. Very serious Amora, worthy of listening to. Rashi, by the way, on the Gemara there, points out that even Yov, died with a good name. So this idea of acquiring a good name is priceless. The Gemara in Brachos later, in the whole last section of the Gemara, where it talks about dream interpretation, brings a very interesting dream. It says if somebody sees themselves in a dream in a small boat, I would say, if I was right, it means he's got to go to the bathroom, but he's like distorting it in a dream version. So if a person sees a small boat, so that means that his good name will be known. But if he's in a large boat, it means that his family's good name will be known. Very interesting. Again, the metaphor of the boat, this is the famous Gra's approach to the Sefer Yonah, that the boat was the body and the Shama, the soul, was Yonah in the boat, and the soldiers were the personality, and the waves are the challenges of our lives. And that's why, if you notice, the minute Yonah's body went into the water, the storm stops. Because the minute a person dies, all the problems are gone. It just sort of ends. I had a talk the other night at a shloshim, and I was just in Finland on business, and I was in the middle of a really heavy-duty business meeting, and in the middle of the business meeting, I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I got a fishbone in my throat. And my first thought was, how embarrassing to die here, right? I suddenly thought about like it'd be a great little sitcom, like really embarrassing places to die. But I just realized, wow, it's really, I don't want to die right here. Thank God I didn't. That's why I'm here teaching the class tonight. But the idea really was, you realize that this passage through life, all of these things that are such big problems, how they just end like that. How the storm just calms. And I think that this could be a very big lesson which Chazal try to transmit in many different ways to us, which is especially brought out in Rebbe Nachman's story of the 7 beggars, about the blind beggar, that the whole idea of the youngest baby having knowledge older than the oldest is that basically it becomes a psychology in life where you see that you're already dead and yet you haven't even been born. And somehow that allows you to always find like a baby an amazing fascination with life. Life never becomes routine. It never becomes boring. It never becomes ho-hum. It's always, oh my gosh, moda'ani lefanecha. I wake up to another day. Oh my gosh, it's not just another day. It's this day, which never existed before. And I get to be a part of it. This is awesome. And at the same time, I'm already out of here. So all those things, those really, really upsetting things, just think about Yonah's body hitting the water and the water goes calm. So that's a lot of the metaphor here, that there's the body in the dream, right? Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. It's row, row, right? So as we just row our lives through this dream, there is something very valuable here. Acquiring a good name. That's the story of Rabbi Yochanan. That's the Gemara here. One more thing here. We're going to go into another pasuk from King Solomon. King Solomon says again, better a good name than good olive oil. So the obvious question is, why olive oil, right? Could have been better than a good bag of pistachios. I mean, why better than olive oil? Obviously, this is how we learn to learn, is we always question, and by understanding metaphor, we're able to open up the concept of what it is. So the simple idea of olive oil is that olive oil is something which King David uses in his Psalms, Tehillim, as well as the grape, because these are, many of the Psalms or Tehillim are introduced with a word to the master of the wine press or the olive press, because by crushing the grape comes out the wine, by crushing the olive comes out the olive oil, and the olive oil we know was used in the menorah, in the temple, to bring light into the world. It's associated with wisdom. Sometimes we go through, what won't kill you will make you stronger. We go through crushing experiences in our lives that if we can, instead of blocking them out of our mind and living back in Egypt in denial, if we are instead able to face them and look at them and think about them and translate them, we can extract the olive oil from the hara and create a light that is able to bring us to a higher level than the hara that we had to go through. However, there's an amazing Gemara. I just happened to stumble upon this in preparing this, because I've gone nuts now. Actually more nuts. I've like become a total Yerushalmi-holic. It's like I love Bavli, but now I've kind of plunged in, and so I'm just at the beginning there in Peah. And I came upon a Gemara in the seventh. The language in Yerushalmi is different. Normally, you're not identifying it by the Amud like you do in Bavli, because there's so many variations in the actual Tfusa, the Tzoras Hadaf. So you refer to more by the chapter of the chapter, and then the particular halacha. So in the 7th chapter, in the first halacha, I said, "Wow, this is amazing." The Gemara there is talking about agricultural, social concern laws. In other words, one of the ways that Judaism provides food for the poor is through agriculture. And there are numerous laws of them, depending on the nature of, you're talking about a tree or a grain or whatever. Besides the classical ideas of Meiser, tithing, Truma, there are other such things. And part of this has to do, and again, there's variations, we're not going to learn that tonight, it's called Shichacha, which means to forget. So there are things where there are activities where the farmers are doing where things could be called forgotten. And again, that's not important tonight as to how it specifically is defined, but the bottom line is, once that name falls on that and it's called forgotten, the owner, even if now he or she remembers it, is not allowed to touch it. It's not his. It immediately, possibly even as it's falling before it actually hits the ground, but that's a whole other story. By grapes, there's another law there where if individual grapes fall on the ground, they become the property of the poor people. But the Gemara says if you put a basket to catch them, so you're actually stealing from the poor people. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, you only said that the moment that the grape becomes the poor person's is when it touches the ground. So from there they deduct it could actually be in the process of falling, it already became the poor person's. But whatever it is, the idea of shichacha is something which falls and is forgotten. How do you apply that? Okay, that's easy if you're harvesting grain. What about olive trees? What could be, you're going into your olive vineyard, or whatever it's called, and you're now, what's it called?
Orchard.
Orchard, thank you. You're going to your olive orchard, and you forgot one tree. Well, if you forgot that tree, technically you can't go back. All the olives on that tree now belong to the poor people, except in one exception. That's the Gemara here. The Gemara says that there's a type of tree which is called an olive tree that drips oil in its time. This is the name of the tree. I guess its friends just call it drippy. But like, the name is olive trees which drip oil in their time. That's kind of like a long name. Really wouldn't work if you went to camp. You had to put it like in your shirt. Go out 3 times. Anyhow, so the idea is that there is a tree, an olive tree, which is so magnificent and has its own name, that because it has a name of distinction, it could never be forgotten. Right? We know, and I'm not going to go into this now because of the hour, but we know there's a huge analogy, although I do bring Rabbi Yochanan in a minute, between man and the tree in the field. It's like a verse in the Torah as well. You don't have to go too far to find the analogy. So the olive tree becomes, in a way, the idea of man, meaning male, female, not male. Man as person. Person who has olives, has the potential to bring tremendous wisdom and light into the world. Most of us, unfortunately, need the kick in the butt or the crushing experience that then we finally learn. But there's a level where you finally get to the point. I remember like the doctor, one of the things I hated is like, remember when the doctor wants to like look at your throat? So he's got like this little javelin stick to push your tongue down. Yeah. I hate that. I hate it so much. I was actually able to train myself. Oh, how to get the tongue? Oh, I don't need this. And he would just look in, right? It's the same thing. You get to the point you just get sick of getting smacked by God's love, right? You just get it after a while. Okay, got it. Just put that rod away. Got it. And you just do it from the get-go correctly. You bring the oil out naturally. You don't need to have those heavy crushing experiences anymore because you freed yourself from the learning cycle and you advanced to a higher level of now you're living on a level of wisdom with God. You have a name. With that name, you will not be forgotten. This is why the male, now I am saying male as opposed to man, male has a more of a difficult challenge of forgetting God than female. And this is why, I forgot his name, I apologize. This is why a particular Rav says that one of the words for male is a zachor, from the word zecher, from remembering. Because the letter zachor, which means male, are the letters of the word zach rosh, a clear mind. That's the male challenge, is to have a clear mind. Women have a much greater bina yetera, so they're intuitive of truth. So Gemara says a woman can smell or sense the guest's nature more than the man can. So women have a different frequency that men don't have. So they have to actively make a zach rosh, a clear mind. And a zach rosh is the idea of olive oil as well, but I'm not going to go into that now. So this tree, therefore, we have another expression. In the laws of bitul, there's a concept of something falls into something else, depending if it's truma, it's 200, or under normal circumstances, it's 1 in 60. By the way, I don't know if you ever heard this, but if you haven't, this is really cool. It's not mine, but it's still cool. And that is, why 1 in 60? I mean, why not a round number like 1 in 57? Right? Why 1 in 60? So look at what happens when you make something bitul. It becomes nothing. So it becomes ain. It's nothing. Ain is aleph, which is 1 against 60. Yud and nun is 60. 1 to 60 is ain. So that's bittul, 1 in 60. It's kind of cool. Anyhow, but the point of it is, there's a rule in this, what's called taruvas, if you ever suffered. Learn through this for your smicha. So one of the things that taruvas you learn is there's certain things which are not batul, which we're not going to go into tonight. But one of these things is, here's the phrase in Hebrew, and I'll translate it, davar chashuv lo batul. Something of significance is never batul. An individual is never batul. As a person, you are never lost. You're never a nothing. You are always a something, because you are a davar chashuv. You are an important thing. You are an important entity. You are the yud from Ratzon Hashem inside of your actual soul. And this is a process of from neshama to neshima. God breathed the soul into the person. How did that transformation go? From the neshama, the soul, into the neshima, by the placing of the yud inside the middle of the neshama. When God created you specifically, rather than from the olam neshamot, from the world of souls, and now you became Frank or John, you have that yud. That's the tselem elokim that comes inside of you. Where do you get the tuf? So the tuf is the entire Torah that you learn when you're in your mother's womb, and there's a candle burning on your forehead that allows you to see all of creation. All the Torah is inside of you. All the Torah is outside of you, because everything was created with Torah. So when you have this tuf, which by the way is also the remez in the Gemara in Shabbos, I won't talk about it now, but about, if you remember the Gemara about they painted the tuf initially in ink on their foreheads, and then they switched it to blood. But that's another story. But the point is that the tuf, and that's why, this idea is the Torah is within us. This is the bereshit of the yud tuf inside the neshama. And the neshama, we know also, is the same idea of Moshe. Moshe reaches the 50th gate of wisdom. The letter nun from the 50th gate with the word Moshe is the word neshama, which of course is the same word as Mishnah, which is again Torah, back to that idea of tuf. So we'll just end it up here with a couple of ideas. First, this beautiful Gemara from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, again, Rabbi Yochanan, he says, why does the Torah compare man to a tree? And he says that if a scholar is like a fruit-bearing tree, meaning he has good character traits, then people may eat from his wisdom, and he also may not be cut down. However, which is like the law of a fruit-bearing tree, it may not be cut down. But if his character is rotten, it's interesting, right? It doesn't say if he's not a real scholar. It doesn't say that. He could be a tremendous scholar, but if his character is rotten, this is Rabbi Yochanan. His character is rotten, then people should not only not eat from his wisdom, but they should cut him down. Just like you cut down a tree that doesn't bear fruit. Because if you think about it, when God commanded the trees to bear fruit, he didn't just say, all the trees in sections 3, 7, and 34 bear fruit. And all the other trees, no. Every tree was supposed to bear fruit. So how could you have trees that don't bear fruit? That's not today's class, but it's an interesting question to leave yourselves with. How could trees rebel against God? But that's not for now. The point is the analogy. The analogy in the Gemara Taanis is talking about the idea that this is, again, the olive tree that has a name because it's learned how to come together. And I'll leave you with sorry, let's see which one thing here. Okay. So I just want to come back to this idea of the word for neshama. The neshama, soul, if you notice the middle two letters is actually the word name, shem, shin mem. And its outer letters, this is a very important idea, especially in Kabbalah a lot, the relationship of outer letters and inner letters. Since I mentioned the name Moshe, I'll show you an example. Moshe and Aaron said, Nachnu ma, what are we? And they said it without the aleph, by the way. In other words, unless we're unified in the aleph of a Kadosh Baruch who are we as a nation? We'll just fight each other, God forbid. Nachnu, not anachnu, Nachnu ma. But Moshe, therefore, is, if you look at his outer letters, they spell ma, mem he. His outer world, ma. But his inner world is Shekhinah. It's the Shin. So much fire and so much light, he had to cover his face when he came down from Sinai. So this is the same idea. There are a concept of outer letters and what they reflect and then what they embody. Not in terms of shorish, just in terms of the seder of the letters. So in the word neshama, you have the outer letters of 50 and 5, right? 55. So 55 is a very magical number on two levels. One, 55, if you count up sequentially every number from 1 through 10, it comes out 55. Right? 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6, and so on. If you do 1 through 10, you get to 55. So we know that God creates the world in the 10 utterances. God creates and maintains the world through the 10 sphirot, and so on. So this idea of the transformation of working through the level of the 10 is the framework of the letter He, which are the 5 worlds God created, and the exit from those 5 worlds, which is 50, which is the Nun Shari Bina, the 50th gate of wisdom. And the soul, which is what these 4 letters spell, is rooted, the black box in the airplane is your name. That's what's in that middle. That's what's contained there. And as I mentioned, when that Yud comes in the middle, that also changes the name to Sim, that God placed you there. It's not like, God was like holding your neshama and was like aiming you for like a really frum family in Borough Park and chucked and a wind blew you out to Farmingdale and you grew up non-religious. No. God picked that family, that environment, that world, that time, that place. It was seen. When the Yud came into your name, that was your destiny of where to go, and that which would lead you to your destiny is the idea of your name. And the last thing on that is, this is hinted at also in Kabbalah in the word Shema. Shema, again, Shin Mem, name, Shin Mem Ayin. The ability to have the name is the ability to hear. When one has their name, they have the ability, or when one is in tune with their name, to hear the 70 faces of the Torah, the 70 nations of the world. One can communicate to the entire world. That's why to be a member of Sanhedrin, you had to speak the 70 languages. You had to know how to communicate to the entire world around you. And through that Shema, of creating the world where the world can hear what God has to say, that brings Tikkun Olam. And that brings God in the same way, not only to allowing us to face the world, but more important, to learn to face ourselves. There's a bonding between God and ourselves. And I'd just like to read you a Rashi from the Gemara in Brachos. Rashi says, when talking about the tefillin straps, he says they are to be worn in a manner as to spell God's name of Misha Amar Dai, or Shakai, like we have on the mezuzah, which translates as the one who says enough. And therefore, by doing so, Rashi points out, he makes the human arm a partner, so to speak, with God's arm. And therefore, it also helps us to remember that in this world, this is not our world for the taking, but it's God's world who sets the boundaries, both in terms of what we accomplish in our lifetime, as well as the length of days we have in our life and to do and accomplish what we have. And that's, I think, why also the Gemara Baba Basra, and here's my last point, says there are three things which are called by God's name. One of them is Jerusalem. One of them are the tzaddikim, and of course that means male and female. And the last one is Mashiach. Because again, these three components represent the full manifestation of revelation of God in this world. So that becomes, and here's the idea, Vayomahu Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. It doesn't mean that his name, as the Gemara in Psachim and Daf Nun asks, it doesn't mean that God's one thing and God's name is another thing. That's ludicrous. It means, okay, on the simple level, the way the Gemara over there says, it means the way you pronounced God's name and the way it's written right now, it's different, right? One starts with a Yud, one starts with an Aleph. But what does that really mean? It means that right now it's not possible, or it has not yet become possible, that that which is real reality is the same that we perceive. Our perception is screwed. Our perception is not really accurate with the real truth of what's happening. And therefore, the beauty is as we illuminate ourselves and we bring that holy light, allow our egos to die so our problems, so to speak, become minimalized, and allow ourselves to hear real sounds of real things, of real importance, and become that living example. This represents this idea of complete fruition that as God willed it to be, is the same as how we see it to be. And so that's really our challenge. Our challenge is each one of us to find our uniqueness. How is it that our name relates to us personally? At the same time, to appreciate the value of every other person as also being unique and also being a davar chashuv, as being valuable and important, so that we can bring the name Israel into the world, so that when you open up the newspaper in the morning, people are praising the wonders of this amazing people in a great land that the whole world comes to love. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming out on such a horrible night.
For sure, thank you.
Even New Zealanders.
If anybody's not on our mailing list, please sign up.